Welcome everyone to Reimagining Cyber. I'm Rob Aragao, and believe it or not, it is the 200th episode. I personally can't believe that we've been doing it this long. I appreciate and grateful to all of the guests that we've had on over the years. We're going to do kind of a viewpoint from different angles, myself, as well as Tyler Moffitt, my co-host, on just some of the things that we've seen over time, some of the things that we're looking at going forward, but basically just a great reflection overall on our time in doing the podcast. Tyler, why don't I hand it over to you? I know you want to kind of kick things off with some questions.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate being a part of the podcast because we've covered so much over these past 200 episodes, whether we're talking about all the ransomware happenings and takedowns and basically identity becoming the new perimeter, supply chain stuff. A lot of that stuff really, hasn't gone away. It's just evolving. So I guess let's start at the beginning for a bit. When you first kicked off this podcast, what was the gap that you were trying to fill?
Yeah, so it was the end of 2020. I think it was December 2020, actually, when we launched our first episode. But the basis of Reimagining Cyber all was centered around a key theme that myself and Stan Wisseman at the time was a co-host with me when we launched, around cyber resiliency. And it was really one that talked about, how could we start thinking about cybersecurity differently? How could we leverage different approaches that would allow us to be much more impactful from a business level conversation and that maturation over time? And then obviously, who are the key guests that would come in and provide different perspectives, ways that they've executed successfully on leveling up cybersecurity to be much more of a resiliency kind of based model and approach. And one of the early on guests that we had was Dr. Ron Ross of NIST, who was really one of the key driving forces behind the whole cyber resiliency framework that NIST had put out years ago, right? So at the time when we launched in 2020, think about this, the NIST cybersecurity framework around cyber resiliency had already been out for 10 years. And no one really was paying attention to what this was all about, what was behind it, and what are the things that we should do and approaches we should take. So that's really kind of what we anchored ourselves towards when we got off the ground initially, if you will, Tyler. So that's the kind of genesis of everything that came to be and how we've over time obviously evolved in many different directions with the show.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting, the number of and variance and wide spectrum of people we've interviewed and topics we've talked about. And I guess covering the 200 that we've done, if you look back at all of them, what do you think is the biggest shift that you've seen in cybersecurity at that time? How have you personally think about it? Has that changed? And what do you think the shifts are?
So the shifts are just, all over the map, right? Because just how quickly things in tech change and how quickly, obviously, within cyber, they change even that much more. So I do believe that when we, again, were talking about resiliency at the onset, it was more of an educational thing. But as it evolved over the course of that, probably in the first, maybe a year or just over a year, the conversations of guests that we had on did start mapping around this kind of whole theme of how do we assess the environment, prepare for different types of attacks, realize that we're going to actually be impacted some way or another, but minimize the impact and recover as quickly as possible. So I think, that was one of the key emphases that I would say that was a key shift within the 200 episodes, if you will, early on. But then, of course, over time, think about supply chain attacks, right? Think about where we are now with AI. So it's just continued to move over so many different areas of rapid evolution of capability and how we're thinking about, our approaches to be able to help support deterring those types of attacks, minimizing again the impact on those types of attacks as well, and up-leveling, a lot of the different things that we have to consider for efficiencies, for better outcomes for the organizations that, our listeners are behind the scenes really supporting and driving, the cyber capabilities behind.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of shifting, a lot of tactics change, evolutions, if you will, the AI sort of helping and hurting the situations, helping bad guys, helping good guys. And I guess, I just wanted to ask you, what do you feel like the industry in general, is there any sort of patterns or trends that you've seen as far as them underestimating in cybersecurity?
Um, Underestimating. So I kind of just alluded to the supply chain attacks that we saw, SolarWinds being the prime kind of example of that. I think that was very heavily underestimated. I don't think people were really paying attention to understand, exactly how attackers could, get into a particular component or part of the chain, if you will, within the supply chain effect of development and delivery of software, and
Yeah.
create such havoc, right? By injecting themselves in, flying underneath the radar, and then being able to execute attacks on so many different organizations that are using that particular software vendors solutions. That was really an eye opener, I think, for the industry. And how they had to actually better evolve and mature, review their overarching software development lifecycle capabilities. Understanding, I think, was a key driver. Understanding the need to actually truly do shift left as a core methodology of embedding security into development practices as early as possible. So I think that was really one that was, again, very much underestimated. And then there was a trickle effect of others that came out, Kaseya and just kind of others that we never even heard about, but was really very much centric to the impact of software supply chains being impacted.
One thing I've been thinking about, want to know how you feel, is do you think attackers actually got more sophisticated over time, or did they just get better at scaling what already worked?
No, I definitely think they got more sophisticated and continue to get more and more sophisticated. We've had some
Interesting.
really good conversations around the topic as it relates to how it's really become a true economy for the attackers. There's absolutely organized crime behind it and supporting it. We had some great conversations with organizations like Interpol. We discussed it with other organizations around educational reviews of what's happening out in this space. And I just believe that, as much as we think we're keeping up with tech, the attackers are absolutely continuously being, 3 steps ahead of us, unfortunately. And even the world that we're living in right now with AI and the things that we're trying to accomplish around, just how efficient is AI going to be to support different capabilities. We're seeing great outcomes there already. However, we have, for the right reasons, guardrails and governance that we put in place without just launching. Well, the bad guys don't really care, right? So they'll just launch, learn, and if it screwed something up, they just, no big deal. It's not impacting operational, organizational outcomes. It's just them looking for something net new to be able to go after and drive into being able to figure out how to get into an organization, disrupt the organization, pull data out to monetize thereafter, things of that nature. So it's been an interesting kind of perspective, I think, in that approach.
That's funny because I actually lean more towards scale over sophistication. I mean, I've talked about in a bunch of episodes like ransomware as a service, initial access brokers, like the whole ecosystem. I feel it's an industry now, and I personally feel that attackers didn't just suddenly get smarter. I think they got more scalable.
Well, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, because I think that's a level of sophistication, right? In other words, understanding that they really are driving an economy and how do you operate your business. And so you look for all these different efficiencies, you look for capabilities that will drive scale. So I think in essence, it's kind of the same thing and approach, but at the end of the day, they're definitely moving at light speed, and we're still playing a little bit of catch up, if you will, right? But let me flip the script kind of over to you, Tyler, right? So as you talked about, there's a lot of different kind of areas that you focused your attention on in the different episodes that you've been a part of. One of them, obviously, very much has been focused around ransomware. Maybe just kind of talk about that over your time. How have you seen this evolution, and what are you seeing as kind of core impacts today around ransomware?
Well, yeah, I mean, you think of ransomware and you think of the encryption and the keys, and it's really just not about encryption anymore. It's more about access, exfiltration, and extortion. There are groups out there now, ransomware groups, if you could call them, that don't even do any encryption whatsoever. They literally just gain access, get the data, exfiltrate the most, personally identifiable information, whether it's from employees or from customers. The sensitive data is what they're after to exfiltrate, to then leverage for extortion on their leak sites, because the damage to brand, reputation, for the company to have to deal crisis comms, the GDPR and CCPA data policy governance, regulations, and the fines that they would be subject to if they don't disclose in a certain amount of time, the crisis comms they've got to deal with to the shareholders. All that stuff is massive and actually gets, especially a lot of the larger organizations, it gets them to pay, and it's a better psychological squeeze than just here's the keys to unlock your stuff, because maybe they've gotten better at some resilience and backups, and they sort of can find a way to bounce back quicker than average. But that's not the concern. Now it's the public awareness that they were subject to a breach that's super nasty. And so it's like the monetization layer, right? That's the real game, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, so it's the impact again to that organization you just talked about, right? There could be the penalties, the fines that come along. Their brand is out there. Their brand is impacted negatively, many different regards. From a market perspective, from a consumer perspective, for sure. So I completely understand and appreciate where that's coming from. One of the other things I wanted to get your thoughts on, we kind of were touching upon it as it relates to the topic of AI, but what have you seen as it relates to security teams and really truly being able to leverage automation, right? Are they truly leveraging it to its fullest potential at this point, what's available to them? Or is it still kind of, they're a little paused and kind of, hey, we need to verify and validate that this will really work. We're not negatively impacting the organization. Just what are you seeing around automation overall?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, because who is benefiting ultimately from AI and this scale of, is it the bad guys, is it the good guys? I would say there's a slight edge to the attackers right now, purely based on speed, scale, super low barrier to entry, like the lowest we've ever seen. You just basically raise your hand and say you want to commit crime, and they'll get you all the tools you need and sort of all these templates set up that you don't even need to craft anymore.
Mm-hmm.
AI didn't exactly invent new attacks. It just made the existing ones faster and just easier to run at scale. And then as far as defenders, and are we quite matching to keep up? Close, but not quite, no cigar. The challenges there, I would say, are tool overload, integration gaps, skill gaps. I wouldn't say they're sort of losing that battle or right behind it because of a lack of tools or anything. It's mainly because of complexity, and then like you talked and mentioned a little bit earlier, the governance that's coming in as AI gets. I feel like it's really tough with AI, and this stuff sort of lags behind on proper usage and making sure that's not yet another surface area of attack.
Mm-hmm.
and using it. It's definitely tough with criminals. It's like they don't really have any governance or sort of any of that,
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like they have the edge.
That's absolutely right. It's they actually can drive the speed, can misstep, and it's okay if they misstep. Where on our side of it, if we misstep, it could be a big problem, right, for the organization overall,
Mm-hmm.
right? So thinking about AI and really focusing a little bit more on that topic, just what's your general view on AI as it relates to, are we really seeing the actual value at this point in time, or is it still a little bit of hype or a lot of hype? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel we got a little bit of both, if that makes sense. Everybody is cashing in on the AI. You go to any security conference whatsoever, and AI is sort of shoved down your throat. Everybody's leveraging AI, everybody's using AI, and it's a little bit of confusion, if you will, on what types of AI are being leveraged. Is it supervised? Is it unsupervised? A lot of the times I feel like AI is a force multiplier. A lot of people always think it's just going to come in and replace all your jobs and do all your things for you. And for right now, at least from a security perspective and operations, I feel it augments. It augments the individual worker, and it definitely has a huge, again, force multiplier. I feel like that has a huge potential in triage, and as far as managing alerts and anomaly detection. There's a big problem with alert fatigue. Like we said, tool sprawl, too many tools, being able to try and consolidate and manage those. That's really important. But as far as its ability to just automatically go out and crawl and find and automate the detection, the most sophisticated, newest stuff that criminals are creating is going to defeat what AI is going to try and scrape and find. Like AI is super useful, and we've been using AI for a long time now, but it's mostly used to catch the low-hanging fruit, which is like 90% of the stuff out there is the easy to catch low-hanging fruit. But when it comes to like the absolute brand new nation state, cutting edge, if you will, threats, um, you still need humans for that. And obviously augment them with AI and empower them with AI, but it's a balanced approach. And so because at all these security conferences, you hear AI so much, it does sort of feel like, I feel like they have overhyped it to a bit. Like I don't want to underscore AI because it's definitely there. It's definitely the future, and it's accelerating acceleration. It's only going to get leveraged and used more and more. But I feel like it's pushed a little too much as the ultimate answer for everything.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah. It's I agree with you. It's cutting through the noise from a vendor perspective, and what you're seeing at different, security conferences for sure. Everyone has to have something to do with AI in their message. And then when you actually get into the conversation about, well, how are you leveraging AI and what are the outcomes you're actually able to deliver today for organizations, it gets kind of squishy, doesn't it? Pretty quickly, right? And if you go back to some of the things you were calling out, I think it's an important aspect, which is for sure AI, and it's been doing this for a while, is helping with more of that kind of, the trivial tasks and looking at more, if you look at it from a security operational capabilities perspective, the tier one kind of analyst work is easily offloaded now to have AI support that for you, right? So that's a great thing because now it takes those people and it levels them up, right? To be able to do more advanced type of working capabilities for the organization. While AI does take care of the low-hanging fruit, great. That'll continue to advance. There'll be continued, let's say, comfort with what AI is able to execute for organizations. Still a little bit touch and go to verify that that's where we want it to take right now. I think it's still a little early, but definitely moving very quickly. There's that balance, as you said, right? There's a balance between reality and hype. We are still seeing, again, continued evolution about how it's helping for sure. We saw things around, what obviously Anthropic and Mythos and Project Glasswing is all about, kind of, launch quick, concern, reaction, some pause after people are really digging in and seeing what it can do and really isn't quite able to do quite at the level a human can at this point in time, but moving, again, very quickly. So all interesting aspects. The other thing I want to kind of pull on the thread a little bit with you that you brought up, which I think is very important to call out, is just this fatigue around the different types of tools that organizations are using, right? I mean, on average, an organization is using over 70 security tools, which is insane to think about, right? Tons of them, of course, provide overlap, but it's just like, think about it. Like if you and I are within that organization looking at different tools, and like the swivel chair, it just never stops spinning, right? How do I pull this stuff together? How do I really understand what's what? So it's, I think, a core area of our focus in looking at where's the opportunity to be able to, one, consolidate different tools that truly drive better efficiency and, most importantly, accuracy of understanding really what's happening right now. What's the most important priority I have to deal with that's going to, again, minimize the impact for my business, my organization, my operations. And I think that's at a point of where in the market, we're starting to see some maturation. We're starting to see some capabilities that we've seen work in other areas of IT cut across into the cybersecurity parts of our organizations that can improve. So again, maturation of what we're seeing, adoption of other things that we've seen work in parts of the technology organization in the past, starting to cut across, merger of capability and convergence overall. I think that's a key theme for what we're going to see going forward. And AI will definitely be a core accelerant to be able to make that a reality. So I just wanted to call that out because I think that's a key area we keep continuously are seeing different areas of concern around.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you called it out pretty well. I mean, it's very complex. There's a lot of tools. And I feel like reducing the complexity and, like you said, specifically prioritization is the biggest part in trying to fix. And I feel like we'll have the biggest impact in solving those problems.
For sure. I wanted to jump into the people side of the equation. And we've talked about this in many different episodes. We've had, from a people conversational topic, we've had people around, just how are cybersecurity analysts working in this business able to survive from a mental perspective, right? We had some folks from Australia come in and have a conversation on that topic. We've had the topic, of course, around the human being the weakest link. We've had that many times as a conversation point. But I wanted to have you delve into this. This is an area obviously you've covered quite a bit in the past too. When you think about, phishing and social engineering types of attacks, when you think in AI is part of that now, right? Making it even more difficult for us to distinguish what's what. When you think about the different types of, impacts from a controls perspective around the human element, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? And is, kind of that term about humans being the weakest link, is that still really applicable this day and age?
Yeah, I mean, well, phishing still works after 20 years of awareness training, right? It tells you that it's not just a user problem, and it's really not just a training problem. I think like it's a human behavior and context problem. And this is the one area where I will drum up AI as definitely helping, not only with the sophistication, but the scale and the gall and some of the tactics that they'll be doing and coming after. And they're almost even evolving it. I feel like you would think phishing is just an email or a text, right? Or a typo squatting on a web page. And like now it's changed now to where it's using AI to scrape all the information you've ever shared on any social media to build a profile on who you are, where you work, what charities you do or are interested in, or where you eat, because you shared a photo of where you went to go eat or where you traveled to. They have all this sort of stuff built out, building a profile of you, about you, and anything they can possibly get or buy on the dark web. And then specifically like Scattered Spider, they pioneered this last year with the IT help desk reset. And so they basically just call up the company, pretend they're you, have all the information they would need to pretend they're you, and then force a reset that way. And that's their in. They literally just log right in because they've reset everything for them, pretending that they're you, which is crazy, right? And that's entirely different from what you were educated and trained about, even 5-10 years ago. So it's a tough one for sure. And I think that identity is the new perimeter, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I do feel like that is the first line that everybody has to be concerned about, no matter what your size of your business. That is for sure the number one priority, I think, in the, securing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that those are all great points. And I do believe, the whole topic of identity becomes really prevalent. We've been discussing this for a while, that it has served as the new perimeter between, if you look at it from just how you get into an organization, the unfortunate events that we've already seen, you alluded to a couple of different examples. We've talked about them as part of earlier in our conversation. So I think that's definitely an area of emphasis that we're seeing a lot of further review of programs, rationalization of tools. And again, where are the gaps and what are these organizations investing into as part of the new identity program? And identity is evolved to definitely be more of a focus on the cybersecurity side, more than the traditional kind of IT ops side over the past several years as well, which I think is critically important.
Yeah, I'm curious. What do you think? What separates organizations that like respond well to incidents from those that struggle? Mm-hmm. Do you think that humans are the weakest link, or what's outdated at this point?
So I don't know that humans are the weakest link, maybe. I think the problem still kind of what's a bit outdated kind of goes into this whole, as I was just mentioning a little bit earlier, this lack of convergence of how we're seeing things from again, traditional kind of IT operational perspective that's worked, and how that can come across and support some of the things that we're trying to accomplish and drive forward with cybersecurity. So here's an example. Think about DevOps, right? And I think, you know this, like I'm not a big proponent of calling it DevSecOps, because it should just be DevOps where security is truly embedded in there. And when we're talking to development audiences, if we're saying DevSecOps, it's like, well, why are we saying that? we're trying to educate developers that security should just be simply embedded in what they're accomplishing and developing secure code and releasing that code in a secure manner. And so I bring that up as an example because that is this convergence that's happened over the past several years of, right, the dev teams with the ops teams working together effectively, and then security melded into it. So some organizations have absolutely done a great job of making that much more of a cohesive model that just simply works. Others are still trying to figure out how to kind of put the pieces together. But that example is to say this need for also converging about, hey, how do I have better visibility, understanding of what's happening from an operational sense in IT to the cyber aspect of things. So look at the real world. CrowdStrike last year, major outage.
Airports.
Right? All of the impact across different organizations that use CrowdStrike. And I'm not pointing the finger at CrowdStrike. The example is much more about how do we look at understanding initially and as quickly as possible, is this a IT operational issue or is this a cyber attack? Right? And so people were kind of leaning towards, yeah, well, it's an IT operational issue. But still, well, there was questions. Well, was there really something else behind the scenes that made it happen? Because people were starting to think back, well, is this another software supply chain attack? So my point is if you're actually connecting the dots across those different elements of telemetry, you're much more understanding the reality quicker of what's coming your way, or if it's already in and impacting you, again, minimizing that whole impact aspect comes into play to reduce the concern and issues. So I kind of look at it that way, Tyler, which is this convergence need of us being able to better work together, and dev, I think, and ops coming together over the years is a prime example of, yeah, guess what? When it's done right, it can work, and we can do the same thing for other elements of cybersecurity as well.
Well, I like what you said with shouldn't just be DevSecOps. All DevOps should be security in mind, and I completely agree. And I feel like this is the paradigm shift we're looking for in like a business reality. Like, do you feel that organizations are actually getting smarter with security investment and seeing that as security everywhere, or just spending more and hoping that solves the problem, or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a mix, right? It's a mix. There's definitely organizations that continue to throw money to try to solve these different problems. It's a case of the chase the shiny object, right? Oh, this is the type of attack that's happened. It was a gap. We didn't have the right, capability put in place. Well, now we got to go buy something that fills the gap. Do you really? Let's look at what you already have and figure out, can you actually remodel some of those things? You change the way that they actually follow control mechanisms to monitor, and then maybe it would have picked it up. So no, I don't have to go buy something new because I already have capability. I just didn't have that configured in that way to catch, that particular given type of scenario. So smarter in cybersecurity investment means, again, this whole view of, hey, where can I actually drive some consolidation? Where can I, in doing so, not just, hey, I'm pulling up these tools because, I'm only doing kind of the siloed base of what it covers. More importantly, am I still having the coverage? Am I driving better efficiencies in my people and my process aspects by doing so? And I think that's where the kind of, again, maturation of cyber programs is going towards. And I do see plenty of organizations taking that path. I would say what's interesting is that what I call modern organizations are setting the bar, meaning that a company that's been launched in the past 10, 15 years, digital first, cloud first, right? DevOps at the root, like it's the way that they operate, is much more capable of showing the benefits and efficiencies of really kind of merging all these things together as one, right? How cyber works with developers, with IT operations, the ecosystem, it just meshes really well. And then there's the more kind of legacy organizations, the brick and mortars, the large financial organizations that, hey, this isn't that easy to do, and we have to figure out how to tear down these walls and really work with one another. And that typically is also the example of an organization where they're just throwing money at trying to solve the problem of chasing that shiny object. So I think it's a balance. I think it's good to see that many more organizations are starting to realize this kind of approach that is much more about the process that's put in place with the tools that they can leverage today and have current investment in to meld in to an updated approach of how they detect things faster, react to them appropriately, and again, just really drive the collaboration across these different teams. if you will.
No, that's good stuff. I appreciate that insight because it does feel like there's a disconnect between what companies think they're doing and then what's actually happening.
Yeah, no, there is for sure. And let me kind of take it down another angle here, which is from your perspective, right? I know you've done a lot of work with the SMB market space, your research, there as well. What do you see in there? I mean, are those kind of leaning more towards some of the things that we're talking about that's more advanced and it's working there? Or is it still like, no, they're still throwing some money around where they can, different, right? Not as much money, but at the shiny object-based approach, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so from that side specifically, it's more exposure. They have fewer resources, and they're actually like a target. A lot of them still think that I'm too small to care, or to be a focus. And you have to realize like you are a focus because of that. No, you don't have that much cash in the bank, and you don't generate that much money when it comes to ransoms. But they don't care because how long it takes to breach what in many cases is like it's just a home network, and then get the information they need or lock you out, whatever crippling thing they can do, get in, get out, get the money. That has a better return on investment. And we're seeing like 40% of all ransomware attacks will actually go after the SMB mid-market essentially. And there are some groups out there, threat actor groups, that exclusively target SMB or MSPs that serve IT for the SMB purely because of that.
Yep.
And so it's definitely a concern that they need to have. I mean, a lot of them, they definitely struggle. They're definitely constrained from budget, and they like to, how do I say, have a confidence that they're able to protect themselves with as little layers or spending as possible. But it is tough. I will say, and it's I think it's more of an education and a wake up to this surface area of attack is constantly growing, and the AI powered everything tools that we're throwing in there are also another surface area of attack. So, SMBs ultimately they aren't being ignored at all, and they shouldn't feel like they're being ignored because the data we're seeing is showing that they actually have a target on their back because they're easier.
Right. Right. It's true. And I know this is one of the more recent episodes that released that you actually hosted around. To me, it's kind of like that jump off point of MSPs to get into these different organizations. And, if they can access and break into that MSP, then their jump point just is exponentially beneficial to them as an attacker. So we just kind of touched upon, the kind of current state, the reality of what we're looking at in the market today. Let's talk about like what's coming next. And so when you start thinking about some of these areas about security breaches that occur, do you see us being much more of a, hey, this stuff is just going to continue to happen, and there's really no way to prevent all of it. So we need to start thinking much more about how we drive better detection and response capabilities, how we better react to these things overall, and fine tune our approach to recover as quickly as possible. I mean, what do you think in general? Again, forward looking, that we're dealing with? Is it continuous breach, or is it just there are capabilities around driving some investment into proper control mechanisms as well to still prevent, hopefully, the majority of this stuff from impacting us?
Yeah, I guess I'm worried most about the identity first attacks continuing to scale. That automation and AI lowering the barrier even further. I mean, it's already pretty low, and the lower it gets and the easier it gets and the better. I don't know. What do you say on these hacking forums? And you just see these, what seem like kind of idiots making all this money and having such success, just using templates and pre-provided tools and infrastructure for them. Like, you used to have to be pretty smart and capable and competent to be able to pull this off. And now, like I said, it's basically just like raising your hand, right? And the attack cycles are also much faster. So that's very difficult, I guess. So the speed at which attacks happen now is probably, I would say, concerns me the most. And ultimately, I guess What about you? Looking ahead, what concerns do you have? We're heading in a world where breaches are just constant. It's
Yeah.
less about prevention and more about managing impact. What are your thoughts?
So I think it might be just a little bit, I don't know, contrarian, if you will. If you think back, and I go back to again, kind of when we kicked off the podcast, so 5+ years ago at this point in time, this was kind of a pivot point where, organizations are almost kind of throwing their hands up and saying, hey, we can't stop stuff. We just can't. So what we need to do is focus our attention on how we're able to detect and respond faster. Don't disagree. Matter of fact, we still need to do that, of course. I just think that we do need to go back to the core roots of what we're supposed to be doing as cybersecurity professionals, which is figuring out the best ways to actually have the ability to prevent these things from occurring in the first place. And yeah, it's much more difficult now than it was 5 years ago. Guess what? It's going to be more difficult tomorrow than it is today, period. Right?
Agreed.
We talked about AI. It's just the way it goes. But the point of the matter is, I get concerned where I think a lot of people still lean in like, hey, I need to, spend my money or invest in my program at the core with detection and response kind of as my priority. I think that's maybe 1B or number 2 as the priority. I would say that definitely what you should be doing is figuring out how can you put the right prevention in place, the control mechanisms there. And more importantly, how can you be more predictive and preemptive on the different types of attacks, right? So there's plenty of, again, signals and telemetry out there that we're not paying attention to right now that tells you this is what's happening, and this likely, from all of the different intel we have, is coming your way. And by the way, you're going to get impacted because you don't have this control or these controls in place on these particular applications or identity mechanisms, your IoT device environment. Now, you name it, right? Depending on what the scope of the organization covers. So I just look at it and say, we do need to kind of, sharpen a pencil and figure out the better ways to invest in our people process capabilities with AI powering us or augmenting us, as you called out earlier, in a manner that allows us to be much more controlled, focus on the preemptive capabilities, the predictive models. I mean, hell, that's what AI is all about, letting us know, giving us the insights. And is accuracy going to be spot on out of the gates? Hell no. But it'll continue to mature and there'll be opportunities there for it to get better. So I say that, Tyler, because that's just my viewpoint, being maybe a little contrarian, but I just feel that we've gone so far over to like where the marketplace is taking us to detection response and investing more and more there, which is fine. We need to continue to do that, but not as much. Like, let's also kind of think about how can we further invest in better our programs overall to be that much more on preventing, on preempting, and also, again, predicting what we're seeing coming our way.
I'm with you. I think process and procedure are where AI can help us a lot. I mean, that one example with some voice phishing or something, it was an attack, I think, on a Ferrari. And it was the standard, business email compromise or voice phishing where like the VP of finance wanted you to change the bank account numbers of a wire transfer that was going out for tens of millions of dollars. And because of the nature and procedures that they had set up in place before they changed it, because they felt it was the VP, they'd asked, what's the name of your dog? And they couldn't answer it. And so then they didn't do it. And then that prevented the attack. Yeah. And that was actually, and so it's more removing sort of the emotional or gut response that we normally have in suspicion. And it's now just removing that and putting in procedure in place and have to have those type of, procedures that help you prevent that. I think that's where a big improvement can happen. And that's where I think the shift or, the dynamics will change, personally, and where I think that there's a big gap that can be filled there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So let's take it home, right? Give me your viewpoint on what's going to be the most impactful next thing over the course of the year or so. So if we turn back the clock, it's May of 2027. And a year earlier, Tyler said, this is what you need to be paying attention to. This is what's going to be most impactful. Pull it up, right? Crystal ball's there. Let's go. What is it?
honestly, the fundamentals still matter. Cybersecurity, vegetables, eat your vegetables. We're still seeing so many people get wrecked in like the most basic stuff of just like patching, if that makes sense. And we could go through it line by line, but honestly, those fundamentals of the things you know you're supposed to be doing, maybe you don't have the right cadence, or completion rate or full coverage. I feel like maximizing the cyber resilience and your known knowns and trying to conceptualize, the unknowns, but what you can do, getting better at that. Nobody expects perfection, but doing as best as you can with those, cybersecurity vegetables, the fundamentals are absolutely huge, and will, believe it or not, set yourself up better than most organizations. We do not expect perfection, and you shouldn't expect that yourself.
Yeah. So cyber hygiene is your focus in saying, hey, guys, there's always an opportunity to get better. And I agree. That's the foundation is so important, and people unfortunately take it for granted. My big takeaway for the audience, and this could be more kind of the business centric point of view, is, and this goes back to, again, even the roots of the podcast, is a lot of what we were trying to get across to the audience, the particular types of people we're bringing in as guests, right? CISOs, people who have been in the trenches, people who are, tied into even the government aspect of things across the globe. And we've had all sorts of different, obviously, people on here from all walks of life that tie in somehow, some way to cybersecurity, to privacy topics, and so on and so forth. But for me, again, that connection point back to the business side of it is the CISO today is absolutely a business leader, period. Mm-hmm. Whether they're doing it as, in the mindset of I am actually impactful to what my business I'm supporting is able to deliver, is a different story. In other words, there are certain people maybe in the seat that haven't kind of flipped the switch to realize that they are truly that impactful to the business. Those that have, right, and over the past several years, we've absolutely seen this pivot point of a very technically focused only individual as a CISO to now being, hey, I've got my technical chops. I understand, what they really are. But more importantly, I understand how to translate that to the business side of it, to the outcomes need, to the conversations at the executive level, at the board topic conversation of understanding, how I'm going to use my, and I call it 7 minutes on a quarterly basis to provide, here's what we're doing as it relates to cybersecurity or cyber resiliency. Here's what we're really needing to focus our attention on. These are the reasons why. Basically, driving much more of understanding how to have the conversation, using the right verbiage, resiliency, that framing of things from a cybersecurity perspective into the operational resiliency impacts, that works. Business leaders understand that verbiage. We've talked about that many times in many episodes across the 200 that we've done. But I think, again, that continued acceleration of that CISO role being much more of a business-centric understanding of how impactful it truly is so critical. And we've seen CISOs that have actually moved into the CIO function now, which is great to see. The reality of understanding how critical this is as a role to organizations has finally kind of hit its almost, let's say, at a peak of understanding, and the people that are in those seats that are making that translation there from tech only to understanding how important the tech is to translate the outcome business-centric point of view will only get more and more driven as a core requirement for what we see in this space. So with that said, Tyler, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed, the longevity that we've had with the podcast, Reimagining Cyber, for hitting the 200 episode mark. Happy that you came aboard here about, a year and a half ago or so to join in.
Yeah. Episode 122. Happy to be here.
There you go. Just after the halfway point. So it's been a great run. Truly appreciate all the guests again that have been coming on, and more importantly, also the listeners for putting us on their list of replay every single week on Wednesday. Here we go. Let's listen to what Tyler or Rob, both of them, had to bring to the table and who they had on to share. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining over the years, and continue to listen to Reimagining Cyber going forward.
Thanks, everybody.